All right, well, let's rewind here, and because we got a little ahead of ourselves, so we are back here in the Ethnography Lab, and today we have the wonderful Marie-Eve Drouin Gagné, Social and Cultural Analysis PhD student, back again for Season 2. And Marie-Eve is part of what once was the Cabot Square group, working group here in the Ethnography Lab. Now, name change, they are now the Cabot Square Photovoice Collective. So maybe start telling me about the name change.
That happened last Friday, to be
really?
honest.
Oh, it's very recent.
I think we never really tried to name ourselves, and it was kind of always a little bit weird.
Because it was also, there was the Cabot Square Project, which was not you.
Yeah.
Right.
But we came to, like, people would call us here being the Cabot Square Project. We even ended up, maybe I shouldn't say that, but anyway, we ended up with an email address that is cabotsquareproject@gmail.com.
Okay.
The thing is, we understood that the previous Cabot Square Project, which was under the network, and it was like about when they were doing their revitalization, with my quote air quotes, revitalization of the square, and how so they created that project in terms of pushing also for recognitions of like the users of the square and Indigenous peoples and what their needs and what needed to happen in the square, and anyway. So that it wouldn't go only towards gentrification. I'm super simplifying the project, but anyway. But our understanding is that this project had kind of dissolved a little bit. I mean, once, because it was kind of done in a way. Yep. People were still working inside of the network, and it's not that people went anywhere, but the project as such. So I think we didn't really mind using that. But then we received an email to that address at one point saying like, talking about the Cabot Square Project, and I was like, this is not us.
Ball of confusion.
So anyway, there's that, but there's also that we just submitted Monday an article.
Amazing.
That we wrote about the project, but the idea was really to write it as a collective. And anyway, we can talk some more about what it means to work as a collective, because that's something in the air right now in terms of our conversations that we've been having. So anyway, it's part for us, I think, to also, when we think about decolonizing the academy, all of these things, like what do we change? And so writing as a collective was part of also not beginning to say, I'm the first author, you're the second one, who should go when. We also wanted all the co-researchers to be part of that, their voices to be included. Some of them, one of them especially told me, like, well, I'm not super comfortable with writing. And I was like, it's fine. Just make sure that you send your ideas, and we can frame a paragraph around it. That doesn't matter. And so anyway, in that kind of spirit of having everyone's voice in it, we wanted to sign it as a collective. And so like the article goes, you have like the title and then the author. And so the author is Cabot Square Photovoice Collective.
Oh, I love it.
And then normally like you have a biographical, not biographic, I don't know how you would say that in English, to be honest, biographical
information about the authors or whatever. Yeah.
So, and in this particular journal, it's the Cahiers du Sierra. Anyway, they write usually like a paragraph about that person. Okay. So we wrote a paragraph about us as a group. And like we write all the names, and we specified like these are in alphabetical order and not in order of authorship.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's
really cool.
So that's when like the name, like, so the whole summer we kind of operated without a clear name. It was just like the Photovoice Project in Cabot Square, or that's what we wrote on the flyers that we had. Like we didn't define us as really clearly with a name.
That was just last week that happened.
So, but then we really need like to write something down as a group, and so that's when like we needed like an official name, I guess. Yeah. Really, because for the rest we always presented it as the project. It's the project, so it wasn't necessarily us. It was more like around the project, I guess.
Right. And so, just to recap, what the project is. So for people who maybe didn't catch last season, so Cabot Square is a public square or like a park at Atwater and St. Catherine. And if I recall correctly, it's an important gathering place for Indigenous people in Montreal, specifically Inuit people in Montreal, correct? So what was the project going on in the square?
Okay, so the idea came first with that whole idea of the 375th anniversary of Montreal, and we wanted to have alternative narratives and Indigenous narratives about Montreal, and we worked in the Cabot Square and with people in Cabot Square because, Sarah, who's part of the project too, she did her MA in relationship with Cabot Square project, and with Rachel Deutsch, who by then was the coordinator of the project, and now she's still working for a number of. I'm having a blank on which organization exactly she's working under, but it's part of the network, the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Community Strategy Network. Thank you. I'm always a little bit. Should be written there. Anyway, so we had those contacts. So we went to. I think last time we talked, we left it. We had that conversation with the partners. Who were representatives of the network and also the city. So at the end of the Cabot Square project, the one that we were talking about earlier, the one about that when they were revitalizing, again, air quote, the square, I think one of the outcome was to have cultural programming in the square every Friday in the afternoon. So there's some money that goes there into having what they call, it's been circulating on Facebook as the Aboriginal programming of the summer. Okay. So when we met with them, they asked us to be kind of part of that cultural programming. And we wanted to do like something about narratives and Indigenous narratives. So what we decided was we were going to realize a Photovoice process in the square with people who would be there on the Fridays. So a Photovoice process is it's a visual participatory research approach. And the idea is that you give the cameras to the people with a prompt, and they answer it however they want with pictures. We have like a set of ethics, for example, no name, no face, no name, just so that you can't identify who's in the picture, because sometimes it also takes a very political, direction, so you don't want to impact people in negative ways. Anyway, so people take pictures however they want to answer that prompt, but they also narrate their pictures. Right. And so the outcome of that is what we've been calling posters or banners. It depends on how. But anyway, the outcome is the picture with a caption that explains what is the picture. Caption can be a sentence. Some people wrote like there was one. It was unifying collective. That's all it was saying. You would have like two men looking. We would see only the back of their head, but they were kind of
with an arm around each other.
Around. They had their
holding
arms,
each other.
Yeah, holding each other, looking away from the camera, and anyway, and you could see one of them is Muslim. The other one you don't know, but because of what they're wearing, you can identify. Yep. And it was saying just unifying collective, and that's all it was saying.
What was the prompt?
So the prompt was changed with. Let me back up a little bit. Okay. So last time we talked. So this is how it goes. Like usually, you have a prompt, and then people go and take pictures, and they narrate it. They take it however they want. And sometimes it's a very punctual thing. It can be also in a case there was a project and it was about safety on campus for women. I can't remember where, but anyway. And the idea was just take pictures of what feels safe and what feels unsafe. So it can be a very punctual thing. Mm-hmm. Ours was super general. So we, as a group, first thought about how is Montreal an Indigenous place. That was kind of our prompt. already very large, very broad.
Yeah.
But then part of our project was also we had a 2-day workshop before we even began going to the square. We had a 2-day workshop. The idea was to train Indigenous students and community members in Photovoice methodology for them to learn about it, and then they can use it in their own projects and everything. And anyway, we had a budget for that. It was really great. We were able to pay them to come and learn. So like at once also like you're not paying for learning for a workshop, but it's like you're paid to come and learn the methodology.
How many people did you have in the workshop?
We had 7 students and community members and one elder who participated with us too.
Fantastic. Was that fun?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool. And part of it for us was also to talk about our project with different people. So we were all like grad students, non-native, we needed to have like feedback from other people too. So to invite them, like on one hand, we're giving them a training and they can stop at that point and say, I've learned and it's great and that's it. Yep. But we also invited all of them to be co-researchers if they wanted on the project. And so that happened. But also during the 2 days, we did the Photovoice process. We also went to the Cabot Square with them and they took pictures and and that unifying collective one came out of that specific 2 days.
And so you were saying the prompt?
So the prompt, changed. So it was also a way for us to have a conversation about our project with them and have them really input. Like we had like a first kind of advisory committee with the partners when we had a meeting with them and they changed our project basically, right? and then they came in and it was kind of a second kind of consultation for us to like say, is that okay? Or how could we... And one of the discussion we had was about our prompt that for lots of people didn't make sense. The participants in the workshop were like, what does that even mean? And then we realized that saying like Montreal as an Indigenous place was raising the questions of indigeneity and identity. And that was not necessarily where we were going with it. Right. And for some people, some of the participants were like, this is not like, what does that mean? What is an Indigenous place anyways? And some people even said like, Montreal is not like for us, it's more like the colonial space. So anyway, there were like many layers and we were like, oh, okay. Like we didn't realize that we were putting our own, understanding into this prompt. So it was good to have them like their feedback. So we basically said, so what prompt should we ask? Like what prompt would be good to be asked in that context? And they came with like a super basic yet super general one. It was, are there stories you want to tell about this place? So that's basically like the prompt we went with in the square. We were addressing ourselves to the Indigenous users of the square in a certain setting of like every Friday afternoon Aboriginal programming. So there was a certain framing of that. What are it's not a question that you ask like in the void. Right, there was like a very context, in a certain way. Yeah. Partly also by our kiosk. We also had a kiosk. That's something else that I can talk about. But so that's the question we were asking people, like, are there stories that you want to tell about this place? Yeah. And this particular poster that I've been talking about just happened because we were in the square and there were that organization, and it was, if I remember well, it was like a Christian and Muslim organization trying to like bridge them, and they were coming in the square and they brought food for users of the square, some of them who are homeless. And anyway, so they were working at that. And so one of the participants took that picture of them looking away. And that was the story that they wanted to tell about this place, like how people come also here to help and support and gather and across different identities, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And you guys were there every Friday?
So we were there every Friday. So we had the 2-day workshop with students and community members. And then that was at the end of May. And then in June 21st, it's the National Aboriginal Day.
Yep.
Canada National
Across
Aboriginal
Canada,
Day.
Yep.
So Rachel asked us, so they were going to have an event in the square. And so Rachel was like, it would be good for you to have a kiosk. And that's also like a very interesting part of our project, I think, that we really fulfilled like different layers. Like we had our own project that we wanted to do, narratives, alternative narratives, responding to the 375th with Indigenous narratives of this city and the square. But again, there was also like the partners wanted us to fulfill to take a certain place and contribute in a way to the to the Friday afternoon programming. So they were asking us also to have a kiosk that would talk about the history of Montreal, the Indigenous history of Montreal, and of the square specifically. So we built like a kiosk. Well, it was like banners and posters. We did some research. Trisha did some research about the square and the history of lacrosse in Shamrock lacrosse ground, which is like diagonal from it's not there anymore,
right.
but was a diagonal from the square.
Yep.
Marion, like she did a lot of research, archives and pictures of the square throughout time, so at the end of the 19th century to 2002, right after the revitalization. I'm always quoting in the air, like right after the changes they made from 2014.
Okay.
So you could see like the square changing through time. I did some research more about like specific places like La Place Royale, Pointe-à-Calière, Mont-Royal, the thousands of years of Indigenous histories of these places. So there were like different things that we brought, and we printed banners and also pictures. And so we had that, and we also used the process pictures and the outcome of the 2-day workshop that we did as like a way to explain what is Photovoice and what people could like expect of doing.
Okay.
So anyway.
So how did people respond to the kiosk in the square? Were they into it?
So yeah, so what I was going to say is that we had that kiosk, we needed to have that kiosk ready for the 21st.
Yes.
Oh, and so we were part of the like June 21st Aboriginal Day.
Yep.
So that day we didn't do any Photovoice process or anything. It was just about being there, showing up. And it was great. Like, to be honest, the whole process, also just being there every afternoon from that point on, it was also like a community building a little bit, like getting to know people who are in the square and stuff like that. Yeah. And then after that, we were there every Friday afternoon with our kiosk and with a camera and with a printer so that we could print right away the pictures that people would take. We would give them a copy of their picture, and they could like put it in so I have an example here. Of course, people can't see it, but so we would like, we had a little notebook where we would put like the picture, and then the person could write their narrative. That would go with the picture. Again, like it really.
So you have a whole bunch of pictures in this notebook.
I have a few of them. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
They look really
6 and 7. So we had a total of 7 people who participated. We were there 7 Friday afternoon, and we had 7 participations that happened.
Is it just one camera?
Yeah, we had only one camera. We at first we were shooting for having 2 cameras always, but it didn't turn that way, and it was fine. We were expecting a bit more participation than that. There were a number of reasons why that didn't happen. Part of it is, and we just had a meeting, like an assessment meeting last Friday with the whole group, or those who could attend, to like see how things went and everything. One of the things that I heard that I think it's true. So we had to modify the Photovoice methodology in order to make it like a drop-in session every Friday afternoon. But then we talked, and the thing is, like, for Photovoice to happen also, you have to hold a certain space and a certain time for people to get, comfortable to tell their stories in a way and everything.
Right.
So maybe the drop-in session was not necessarily the best way of creating it.
Because people are just coming in maybe randomly on a Friday, and maybe they're not feeling quite like they're ready to take a picture.
So a lot of people talked to us, told us stories, and then we were like, well, it would be great if you if you wanted to like take a picture. But some people were like, not too sure. So there wasn't like as many people who were into it. Well, I mean, I think people were into it, but like from being interested and wanting to tell their story to actually take the step of doing it, it was like another level of like committing that I guess not everyone was like super keen to. Yeah. So that's something to be learned. Like if ever we would do it again, I think we would have to maybe think about the workshop really worked well. Like the feedback we got from the students and the community members who came, and they were like, because it was 2 days, we had an elder with us. There were many layers that made it like a safe space to tell their stories and to do what they wanted to do, which like a Friday afternoon is a bit maybe a rush to do that. Right. Our way of thinking was like we thought the consistency of showing up every Friday afternoon with time would create that kind of relationship where people maybe would be like, okay, I've seen you guys, I know what you're doing, maybe now I'm ready, but
were you seeing a lot of the same people over and over again?
Yeah. It was most of the time the same crew. There's other like factors that chip into it. Like we had to cut short a couple of Friday afternoon because of the rain, because we had such a beautiful July month. Right. That a couple of times like we had to wrap up everything and just leave because it was raining. So that cut short our the kiosk and everything. Yeah. So that explains a little bit because we were shooting for 2 people per afternoon. So we thought we would have like a total of like maybe 14 participants. It ends up 7. So it's like half of what we were shooting for, but it's okay. Like I think it's totally fine. But the quality of the stories we got is another layer too. And I can talk some more about that, but, so there's the rain. There's also one thing, and I'm happy we have that narrative also in the outcome, like the banners that we printed at the end. One of the story that was told is the interruption by the police. And there was a heavy policing of the square
throughout. The whole time you were there. And
I mean, sometimes less, but there was one afternoon, especially that they really disrupt what was happening. They began like giving fine to people.
What was happening in the square?
So there were, people just like some people were consuming maybe. That was like not where we were standing. It was a bit further. I can't even say that they were or not, but the police were definitely there and like talking to them, and I saw them writing a fine to them. There's that. But where we were having our kiosk, and there was a Inuit stone carving happening at the same time of our kiosk, just on the side of where we were, and there was also hoop dancing that day. And towards the end, we were doing a round dance. And just by where we were, there was like a bench, and there was a guy who was laying there. And he was even told by someone like, oh, you should just lay down for a while and you'll feel better or whatever. And the police decided that this is not acceptable. They can't be sleeping on the bench. Wow. So there was 6. They were a bike patrol, whatever you call them.
Oh, they were like police officers on bikes or whatever.
Yeah. But they're like a group of them. So there were 6 of them.
Okay.
The square is not that big. And so like, anyway, having 6 of them already just like patrolling the square was very heavy the whole afternoon. But when they decided like to target that guy and come, they really interrupted like the round dance that we were having. Like they were really just disturbing everyone and everyone's activity. Yeah. So that was pretty heavy.
I hope nothing, and like nobody got violent?
No, nothing. But you know, we were all like a little bit. So, what's our role? What should we do? Like, what do you do when you see something like that happen? One of the things was like, well, we're gonna be at least like we're gonna remain here and like look what's happening and check that everything is. You know, they don't have the right to search their things, for example.
Right.
That's, you know, there's no reason for that.
Yeah.
So there was us, but there were also like people from the city, even like that from the l'arrondissement that were working for the stone carving that was happening. So lots of people got involved and were like, "What's happening here? Why are you guys doing this, anyways?" And anyway, so there was like an kind of altercation also between the police and the people who were occupying the space and saying like, you guys are the ones, you know, you said that he's disturbing, but he's not. He's just laying down. You are disturbing what's happening in here. You're like, anyway, so, so someone, that was at the square that day, took a picture of that and wrote a caption of that. So one of our final poster tells that story.
What was the caption? Do you remember?
The caption says, and I should have a picture of it, but it was bilingual. It was both in French and English, and it said something like the strategy, you know, the SPVM bike squad strategy, 6 against 1, something like that. And you could see them, the police and their bikes, and you could see like the guy there.
Wow.
And so, so that's one story that was important to be told and powerful. And also like on the side of that, I actually I wanted to make like an official complaint. This is like, this is not okay. But that's another long story. But yeah, so anyway.
Did you wind up doing that?
What?
Long story short, did you wind up doing that?
I tried, but they sent me from one, you know, poste de police to another, and like
it's not an easy process.
But the person who took that picture anyway knew some people, and she said if you want to write an official letter to the arrondissement and the city, I'll make sure it gets there. So that's what I did. So I don't know what happened with it, but...
when did that go down? Was that like early on in the summer? Or like
that's a good question.
Like midsummer?
I don't know if I took... I don't have all my notes here, but...
it wasn't like right at the beginning
no,
of your
it wasn't.
time in the square,
we had been there for a while.
Yeah. And is it a heavily policed area in
general? So that's what I was going to say. So that's one time that they really intervened and did some stuff. Yeah. But there were other afternoons that we could see them, and sometimes it's the cadet.
Yeah.
Like
the
it's
cadets.
Not. Yeah. And sometimes it's the police squad. Sometimes it's the bike squad. That's pretty heavy because they always travel like in packs of 6 people. Sometimes it's just like a police car that is like parked not too far. Yeah. You know, so there's that presence is there. So when we had that assessment meeting, like that was one of the reasons that people said maybe because some of the participants and the co-researchers were in the square for previous years when there were also the Aboriginal programming happening, and they noticed that this year it was like maybe half participants in comparison to previous years. So there's that also. Like we were expecting to find much more people in the square, and they realized that there was much less people than there was before.
Did they have any ideas why that?
So, well, the policing, weather, but also the whole changes that happened in the square, the fact that they're still doing some working and renovations, closing, you know, the Atwater metro station. There was a place there in the square where you would get in and out of the metro, and it's closed right now, and they're working on it. And so that's also like a spot where people would get shelter if it would like rain or different things. So the fact that this is not there and they're still like in construction, like that's also disturbing a little bit of normal activities of the square, you know? Yeah. So all of these different factors, I think, influenced, you know, why we didn't have as many participants, but also why in the square in general, the Aboriginal programming was not, I think, as attended as before. What was really interesting, though, it's les camps jours, how do you say that? Day camp of the city. came to the square a lot on Friday afternoons for the Aboriginal culture. So there was lots of kids learning how to carve stones and hoop dance, and it was really cool. And one of our posters talk about that. And it's the woman who was teaching the kids and everyone in the square who, like, I learned a little bit how to hoop dance. And what she wrote is, I have it here, that she said something about how, like, children are her favorite audience.
Yeah.
So it was great also to see, you know, that kind of dynamic of positive contributions of Indigenous peoples to the square, and them being in the role of also teaching and transmitting something to children, non-Indigenous children. So,
what I really find funny is that it's over-policed as if Indigenous people were dangerous, and then they need to be watched constantly. But then day camps and children go there because they learn a lot. So the reality is children are not scared of going there and have fun, but the police over-police this particular spot. So
and that's really that's exactly what I said, like in the letter that I wrote, the complaint. I was saying how, you know, this is an effort to me. What I saw was like how it's an effort to bridge different communities. And it's very interesting what's happening there. Like the children are there from the camps, and then you have, like, you know, workers from the city. You have also users of the square who, like, some of them are homeless people who are there and everything, but they would, like, also dance the hoop dance. So you had, like, all of these things happening. And to me, it was like how you create that really gathering space where different people from across, like, come together in a moment, and a teachable moment and a learning moment. And then, but you're policing it. And to me, it's clearly, you know, racial profiling. Yeah, because I've been in many squares throughout the summer with different activities that are happening there, and you don't see them being as heavily policed. And I'm like, you're there just because this is like Aboriginal programming, or because of the nature of the square and the population who is there, which is, you know, lots of Inuit and other Indigenous peoples who hanged out. But I was like, why are you checking from, you know, this particular cultural event? There's other cultural events all over the city, but this one is an Aboriginal one, and you're policing it pretty heavily.
It speaks a lot also to the exclusion of homeless people, as like if homeless people were dangerous because they are outside of the norm. So therefore they must be dangerous. But on the contrary, we see that in that particular space, homeless people participate in the activities with the children and with everybody, and they're not dangerous.
No. Yeah. And I mean, like, to be honest, like, we also faced, and that's like one thing that we said in the assessment meeting, like there was one of the co-researchers brought it. She was like, you know, there's also an elephant in the room in terms of like drinking in the square that is happening, and like, do we address that or not, or what? But like, even like I saw that a little bit, like, sometimes like you would have during the singing or the dancing, you would have someone that is clearly, you know, in another stage, right? But they're having fun, and I'm like, you know, so what, in a sense?
So what? Absolutely.
You know? If something happens, of course, but there are outreach workers in the square where there's the Roundhouse Coffee. There's also like part of it is an office for an outreach worker. So there are people there that are there to help, and if ever something would happen. So to me, it's like we really don't need that heavy policing. And it's not. And what we were told by the police was like, oh, well, someone must have like filed a complaint. So like the neighborhood people, you know, with gentrification, that's another layer that brings in like people who complain about, oh, there's like people drinking in the park. Anyway.
Well, and you see who escalates the situation is not the person sleeping on a bench, but the 6 people trying to get them to stop sleeping on the bench. So But I what I'm hearing a lot too, which is like so amazing and wonderful, is like that the sort of the community building, like that was happening while you guys were in the square. Like that's really
cool. Like one of my friends told me, he was like seeing, because I would post pictures on Facebook every time, and he was like, oh, well, anyway, your project is just like you go and you chill in the park.
You're like,
And
yeah.
I was like, yes, and that's like the really fun part of it. Of course, there's a lot of work like behind that before you get to this point.
Of course.
But I was like, yes, it's part of it is that, like being there with the people and, you know, just, and I think the consistency. What was super interesting also is like how many people who just, you know, cross the park, come and go, who of course stopped because of the different activities that were going on, like stone carvings or the hoop dance or different things, like, you know, people would notice it and be like, oh, what's happening here? But also lots of people came to our kiosk and just like, what is that? And then just to learn about the history of Montreal and the Indigenous history of Montreal. So also felt like, okay, maybe we didn't have like as many participants as we were hoping in terms of the Photovoice, but our project was really fulfilling like multiple kind of agendas and interests. And I think that just, you know, raising awareness with our kiosk was one of the things that I felt good about, at least. And like, I think it was a good contribution to the whole, like, taking the space as an Indigenous space in the square. Yeah.
So what, tell me a little bit more about some of the pictures.
Yeah.
And then what was the sort of like, what's the life for the Photovoice component after you're done in the square?
Okay. So there's a couple of things that I took note and I was like, I need to say that. Let me just go back to that. So yeah, so the result, so we had in total, I think 15. I call them posters, but let me talk a little bit about that because we had a very interesting conversation. So we decided to print them on textile. And to hang them, like the final exhibit was hanged on with a rope and clothespins, basically. And they were like 30 by 20, about size. I'm talking inches here, right?
Right. Not feet.
No. So anyway, that's kind of the result of it, and we had 15 of them. And I think that in and of itself was really interesting because when we were able to do the final exhibit, the way we hang them in the place, we hang them from the statue of Giovanni Cabot to like two lamps that are in the square. Cool. So it made like a kind of triangle, and we put the banners that we had for the kiosk the whole summer. We put it like around the statue, so it was like a way to really claim the space also. Yeah. So that was really interesting, and the fact that we decided to do it that way also is that it's a transportable exhibit. Like it was easy to like just fold everything up, and then we brought it here in the lab.
Right,
it was on the wall for a while, so we just like hanged rope and then hang these things. And so it's like in and of itself it's an interesting way of like playing with it. But so we have 15 of them, and there are like 5 themes that really come out when we look at them. So if you want to, I can like tell you more about that. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, it's great. I love.
You're like not asking anything.
I know,
like,
well, because
blah,
you know what? It's so
blah,
funny
blah,
because I have like a list of questions and I'm like, oh, check. Like you're just talking about all the things I wanted to talk about. So
sorry,
go off, Marie-Eve.
That's
it's
me
awesome.
Talking too much.
So what are the 5 themes? Get back to talking.
Okay. So some of the posters were really, I call them posters, but some people call them banners, whatever you want to call them. Some of the banners were talking really about the square as a gathering space. So some of them were about like making music in the park because there's also a piano, like those public piano.
Oh, yeah.
There was one, it was like, I should have them all in front of me with the quotes. I'm sorry. But anyway.
Okay.
Lots of them talked about just the space as a gathering space, both in terms of relationships that are created in the square between friends and between collectives, like unifying collectives, all these things. But also in terms of a political space, because one of them was like a picture of the bottom part of the statue. And the quote or the caption was talking about how this is like also a political place, like for many demonstrations, manifestations that happen, meet there. And will gather there before they walk. And also for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, it's a place to go. And just recently there were 2 Inuit women who died in Montreal and under suspicious circumstances, and there was a vigil in the square for them. So anyway, there was like there were some pictures that were talking about just like the square as a gathering space for Indigenous peoples, also for all kinds of people, but also as a political space. You know, the gathering is not just neutral; it's also political in a way of claiming the space. So there was a series of them talking about that. There was also another series. Sorry, I'm searching for it. Oh, yeah. So there was a series of pictures that were talking about what I call mitigated impacts of the changes they did in the square. So, like, one was a picture of there's some really cute tables and chairs that go with the coffee, the roundhouse coffee in the square. Yeah. But they're only for customers only. And so there was a picture that was taken of these, and it was saying empty table with chairs. And when we talked with that person, what they meant with that was like, well, it's all cute and everything, but it's empty. Like no one was sitting when they took the pictures. Like no one was sitting at that moment. And it was a bit like talking about like you're recreating that space, you're renovating it, but then to serve whom, right? So there was that, and then
nobody apparently.
Well, lots of people. I mean, I love the Roundhouse Coffee. By the way, like I think it's the only place in Montreal that I think it's the only restaurant that serves like Indigenous food. Like you can go and have an Indian taco and stuff like that. Like it's meant to be that way, and it's in collaboration with the Itinéraire. So it's great, but it talks to like how different people will come in the square and intervene on it and change things, but then like what's the impact for people in there? So like one of the picture also, it was like 2 pictures going together, and one was a picture of like those new lamps that they put in the square, and it was saying good intentions don't always have the best impacts or something like that. And then there was another picture, it was the sun like through the tree canopy kind of, and so like it was kind of expressing the dichotomy between like that kind of electric lightning versus like the actual natural sun, because lots of discussions were about how this used to be like a green space and it's not anymore. It has some kind of white, it's not concrete, it's a weird I don't know what they put on the
some sort of stone.
Yeah, stones. Anyway, so it's not the same as it was. So that was kind of expressing this.
So that artificial.
Yeah, the kind of artificiality of it. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that goes behind that. It's also like how they created a space that it's much more open and much easier to surveil. Right. Yes. So there's no bushes where you can go and hide and do whatever you would do behind bushes. Right. So
whatever that might be.
Well, one incident that happened, one of the things that you might do behind the bushes is like pee if you don't have access to a toilet. Yeah. And one afternoon we were there, and there was a lady who we realized that one bench, which is totally open to everyone to see, kind of serves as a toilet for people who are there. And we kind of didn't understand the situation when that happened. Like, we were like, why is that person taking off their pants? Like, what's happening there? Like, we didn't understand. Yeah. And then we realized that that's what was happening, and really shocked us in many ways. And one of the co-researchers, like, that's one thing that really kind of stuck with them. Because it's like, it's the basic right of peeing. Yeah. That you don't have. Mm-hmm. Because the square, so there's a toilet, anyway, there's some kind of toilets there, but you need a code to enter. And then you could go like in the L'Ancien Forum in front of it, like the Alexignon place or whatever. Right, but now security don't let anyone go in, because now they know who are the people who are like just hanging out in the square. So sometimes they don't let them in. Wow. So like just the basic right of like going to the bathroom is absent.
Been taken away. Yeah.
So that was like shocking to us too, you know. And so you do all the reflection of the space, and you don't put the toilet, you know, and you take away like the bushes where you could like maybe hide behind to do like whatever you would do. Yeah. Anyway, that's just one thing, but it was an important theme, even like in the outcome of things. Another really important theme that came out was really the Indigenous contributions to the square and to the city. And those I have with me. This more like, as I was talking about, like how the hoop dancing, how she, Barbara, like she taught people to hoop dance. And then she did a poster about that and how her favorite audience are the children, and then like the people who were the star. What's that? I'm having a
soapstone carving.
Carving.
Is that what's going on in that picture?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm like, carving was the name that I was
carving. Yes.
So the carving masters, as we call them, the Inuit men who were teaching people also like. Made their contribution, and they were talking about the positivity of it and how they're teaching people because it's important, and how people told them that they should teach.
So in those pictures, it's like hands carving, and then somebody else's hands kind of in the shot too. I really like that.
And with like you can see also the tools that you use to carve. So they're like in the motion of doing it. And then there was also one that was talking about the roots, the deep roots. It was a more general one, but it was talking about like the deep roots of Indigenous peoples in the city, and also throughout the province, the different nations, and how these roots are still living and alive in spite of trying to annihilate Indigenous nations. Yeah. And and then they were talking about like how in Montreal, we need to plant, or seeds are there for big Mohawk trees to be grown. It's in French, so I'm like kind of translating. So another interesting, I'm going to finish with the teams, but then I'm going to tell you another interesting fact about these posters and the languages that were used.
So that roots one, the picture that is associated with it is a picture of
it's the roots a tree of a tree in the square that grows in the square. So there's not much bushes, but there's a couple of trees. So she took a picture only of the roots. And she says, I can read it in French. Sure, it says, les racines d'ici sont plus grandes que d'où je viens, mais ils ont vécu une tentative de mort d'enterrement oubliée. Mais la nature, plus forte que tout, survivra comme ma nation et les 10 autres au Québec. Et pour Montréal, plantons des graines de futurs grands arbres Mohawk. So there were like a few like posters that were talking like that about like the positivity and the contributions of Indigenous peoples in the square in Montreal in general. And then another series was about the interruptions. So we talked about the police one. There was another one that was talking about like the kind of white entitlement that happens in the square. Yeah. When like one afternoon we were there was like there was always music, speakers with music, and it was Inuit throat singing that was happening. And there's like those white guys that just walked in the square, didn't like really pay attention to the activities that were going on, and they began like making like cloownish kind of gestures on the music, and they were like, I'm really into it, but they were like kind of kidding about it without really taking into account what is happening here. Yeah. So the person took like a picture of that and was talking about like how it's like white entitlement. Like people just walking in and feeling that this is their square and not realizing the use that other people are having of this this square and what it means. And so that was like another series. It's actually two. It's that one and the police one. So different kinds of interruptions, right? And then like a last theme was the support that exists in the square. So part of it was like a hand, like it was 2 hands showing with a little ladybug on it, but it was saying a helping hand. So like just talking about how you can also find these kind of things in the square. And I think for me, it also talks about the network lists about 12 different organizations that are around the square or doing some work in the square with the different population there, either in terms of preventions, but also support. So to me, like these were really talking about that kind of things that exist in the square too. Right. So it was really interesting to see, like, to me, it was like all of these different things that happen in the square, and it's not just one thing, you know.
Yes,
there's
and lots
negative,
of different
there's
layers
positive,
of meaning in all of these images.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
a really
amazing.
rich project, like a lot of really cool stuff came out of it.
Yeah, and if you want to see the pictures right now, they're at the Carrefour des Arts et Sciences at Université de Montréal. So we are participating in a conference that is called Je suis île, I am turtle, and it's about. It was, I think at the beginning it was about Montreal as an Indigenous place and really situated in the 375th anniversary. But then they broadened it a little bit to talk about like urbanity and Indigenous peoples. So not just Montreal, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're participating in the conference that's on October 7th. But with the conference, they also had an exhibit of Indigenous artists and in the urban context. And so talking about indigeneity and urbanity and all of these things. And because we submitted an abstract for the conference, they invited us to be part of the exhibit. And I was like, we're not art, like this is not an art project. Like, but they were like, but they're also trying to like define art in broader ways.
Yeah.
And they were like, the result is artistic and it's, like, and I was also like, you're going to put that with Indigenous artists, but like, we're not all Indigenous. I didn't know where it fit, but she was like, yeah, but the people who took those pictures and who did that are Indigenous users of the square. So, and it is artistic. So anyway, so our thing is there.
Right. Until when?
It's there until December.
Okay. Perfect.
Mid-December. So there's time to go there at Université de Montréal. It's Pavillon Lionel Groux, second floor. Cœur des Arts et Sciences, and so you can go and see what I'm talking about here. And we also, as I said, wrote an article.
Yes, and so is the article the themes that you were just talking about? Is that like the crux of the article?
That's part of the article. We also talk about Montreal as an Indigenous place, the history of Cabot Square. Like, there's a lot in it. Yeah. It was a 9 voices article, so 9 people really contributed to the article.
So 9 people in the collective.
So there's the thing, and that's what we wrote in the biography note, is that the collective is more than 9 people. However, there's 9 people who had the time and were able to really, contribute to the article, but also read it and see it. We couldn't add the names of people who, like, at that moment didn't necessarily answer. It was a like short time thing, with a deadline and everything. Yeah. We didn't feel comfortable putting a name on it if the person didn't even see the article, because then what if we said something they didn't agree with or whatever, it's problematic. Yeah. So maybe when the reviewers give the feedback and we'll have more time to reach out and say, do you want your name to be on it? Yeah. But we really worked, 9 people worked directly on the article. So that was very interesting too. We worked through a Google document and everyone working and then chatting and then changing things. And so, it's a very interesting, I'm really glad. I mean, there's obviously lots that we could talk about, difficulties that we encountered and stuff. Maybe for another time we can talk about that. But yeah, I think we wanted it to be a collective and that's,
sounds like there's a methods article in here too that you could easily easily write, because it was such an interesting part of the process too, because it changed and morphed, and it seems like a lot of the material came out not just from the photos, the Photovoice, but from just the experience of being in the square and hanging out in the square all summer.
Yeah, definitely.
Really cool.
Well, the article, there's a substantial section on methodology there, because we needed to talk about Photovoice and how we modified it. And So yeah, it's a long article. I think it's like 9,000 words. Usually it's like 8 top. So it's fairly long, but to address like all of these different.
There was a lot to talk about.
Yeah, as you can see
as
today.
As we can see. So journal article coming up. You've got the conference that you're going to be presenting at, and you've got the exhibit going on, and then who knows beyond that.
The exhibit is I think the most like the best part of all of it. Like the rest is fairly like academic, like having a conference and everything. But like what's interesting is at the conference, like we'll have also co-researchers present, and like they'll, you know, we really trying like to involve people into all of these different levels. And the exhibit, we already talked about, like we want to reach out to the Native Friendship Center and ask them, do they want to have it for a while there? Like we want to reach out to we want it to be accessible. Like right now it's like in that really, it's a beautiful space, but it's a very institutional and very formal space where lots of people won't really have access to it. Yeah. So we you know, we're happy it's there and the installation looks amazing, but we also want to bring it in different places where people will have much more access to it, as it was on the August 18th. Like it was in the square, it was taking that space, it was like expressing it. That was great.
Do you think that there would maybe be a possibility of it going back to the square?
Definitely. I think so. We talked, so Marion has been big on like, she's been saying like we should reach out again to the Roundhouse Coffee and see, I mean, now they're closing fairly quickly because they're open only in the summer. So we'll have to see. And it has to be at the UDEM until December. That was the deal. Right. Like if we were going to be there, we were going to be there until December. But maybe next year, like, and we already talked about possibilities for like redoing another project, maybe next year, next summer. Great. We've been thinking about like the murdered and missing Indigenous women, and maybe doing something more in relationship with centers and shelters around the square, and really doing more like these kind of a workshop that we did with the students. And as the question would change, because it's not the 375th anniversary anymore, and would be more like that example that I gave about like a campus, like what feels safe and what feels unsafe around here. Yeah, and that could be like something relevant.
Those are pretty provocative questions too. An interesting thing.
Anyway, it remains to be seen. This is because, you know, it's a great idea, but now, you know, realizing it's a whole other thing. And so we'll see how that goes.
Congratulations on this project, because I think it's really amazing. I think you guys did some really cool work there this summer, and the outcomes are, I think, really positive. Right. And you did a really good thing.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to talk to us.
Yeah,
thank
you for receiving us.
And for just chatting. Like, you talked about all of the amazing things that I was hoping you would talk about. So, like...
Sorry for being I talk a lot.
No, it was so good. It was so good. We had 2 awesome interviews today.
Thank you so much, guys.
So thank you for that.